The champagne glass slipped from my fingers in slow motion. Crystal meeting marble, the sound sharp and final, like everything else shattering around me in that moment. But I didn't flinch. I couldn't. Not here. Not in front of 200 people, celebrating what they thought was our 15th wedding anniversary. "Sarah," my husband Michael whispered, his hand on my elbow. "Are you okay?" I looked down at the shattered glass, then up at him. Those green eyes that once made me forget my own name now looked foreign to me. Guilty. How long? I wondered. How long have you been lying to my face with those same eyes? "I'm fine," I said, my voice steady as stone. "Just clumsy." But I wasn't clumsy. I was precise in everything I did. Had to be. Running his entire life behind the scenes for 15 years, while he built his empire. No, that glass fell because 30 seconds ago, I'd received a text message that changed everything. "The photos you asked for are ready. Check your email. You were right about the cabin. Detective Morrison." My phone was still warm in my palm, hidden beneath my clutch. The email was probably already there, waiting. Photos of my husband with her. Photos of them at the cabin we'd bought for our family getaways. The same cabin where he'd told me he needed space to think about our marriage. Just last month. What he didn't know was that I'd hired Detective Morrison 3 weeks ago. What he didn't know was that I'd been watching, listening, documenting everything while he thought I was just the devoted wife, blindly trusting, quietly holding his world together. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael's voice boomed through the microphone, pulling me back to the moment. He was already at the podium, that practiced smile spreading across his face. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate something truly special." Love? I thought bitterly. Marriage? Partnership? My beautiful wife Sarah, who has been my rock, my foundation, my everything for 15 incredible years. The crowd erupted in applause. I stood there, hands clasped in front of me, smiling that smile I'd perfected over the years. The one that said I'm grateful when I felt overlooked. The one that said I understand when I felt dismissed. The one that said I'm fine when I was drowning, but inside I was calculating. The joint accounts, the properties, the business I'd helped him build from nothing while putting my own career on hold. The contracts I'd reviewed, the deals I'd negotiated behind the scenes, the connections I'd cultivated at dinner parties just like this one. Sarah sacrificed her own dreams so I could chase mine, Michael continued, his voice dripping with what sounded like genuine emotion. She gave up her architecture career, her independence, my entire identity, I finished silently, my self-worth, my voice. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here he was, painting me as the sacrificial wife, when in reality, I'd been the strategic mind behind his success. Every major decision, every key hire, every crucial pivot, I'd been there, whispering in his ear, guiding him through. But the world saw him as the visionary and me as the supportive spouse. I thought about her then. Jessica. 28 years old, blonde, ambitious, his new marketing consultant. I'd met her at the office Christmas party 6 months ago. She'd complimented my dress, asked about my skincare routine, laughed at my jokes like we were friends, all while planning to steal my life. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow bleed. First, the late nights at the office become more frequent. Then, the phone calls he takes in another room, the new cologne. The gym membership he suddenly cares about. The way he stops asking about my day, stops seeing me at all. But I see everything. I always have. And now, Michael's voice cut through my thoughts. I want to share some exciting news with all of you. My blood went cold. No, not here. Not like this. Sarah and I have decided to take a sabbatical, travel the world, rediscover ourselves, maybe write that book she's always talked about. The lie came so smoothly, so naturally, But I knew what he was really saying. He was laying the groundwork for our separation, making it sound mutual, romantic even, giving himself an exit strategy that would preserve his reputation while setting up his new life with her. I felt something shift inside me then. Not heartbreak. I'd already grieved that months ago when I first suspected. Not anger. That would come later. This was something colder, more focused. This was clarity. The applause thundered around me as Michael raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, his eyes meeting mine across the room. "To new beginnings," I whispered back, raising my own glass. But we weren't toasting the same thing. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and well wishes. I played my part perfectly. The glowing wife, excited about adventure, grateful for love. Inside, I was already 3 steps ahead, mapping out moves he couldn't even imagine. By midnight, the last guest had gone home. Michael disappeared into his study, probably texting her, probably planning their next rendezvous. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, soon to be just his bedroom, and finally opened that email. The photos were exactly what I'd expected. Him and Jessica at the cabin, her wearing my favorite robe, them cooking breakfast in my kitchen, sleeping in the bed where we'd once talked about growing old together. But there was something else in the email. Something Detective Morrison had found that made my breath catch. A property deed. Jessica's childhood home on Elm Street. The same house she'd mentioned losing in a foreclosure when she was 16. The same house that had recently gone up for sale. I closed my laptop and walked to the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, she was probably lying in her bed, thinking she'd won. Thinking she'd outsmarted the older wife, captured the successful husband, secured her future. What she didn't know was that I'd learned something important during my years of sacrifice and silence. I'd learned that the person who appears to have no power is often the most dangerous of all. I pulled out my phone and typed a simple message to my lawyer. "I need to buy a house. Cash offer. No questions asked. I'll call you in the morning." But what he didn't know was I had already planned everything. I wasn't always this calculated. There was a time when I believed in fairy tales, when I thought love was enough to build a life on. I was 25 when I met Michael at a coffee shop near campus. I was finishing my master's in architecture, sketching blueprints for sustainable housing projects, dreaming of designing homes that could change how people lived. He was 28, fresh out of business school, all ambition and charm. He'd approached my table with that confident smile, asking about my drawings. "Are you designing the future?" he'd said, and I'd laughed because it felt so cheesy and sincere at the same time. "Something like that," I'd replied, and he'd sat down without being invited. We talked for 4 hours that day, about dreams, about making a difference, about building something meaningful together. He told me about his plan to start a consulting firm to help businesses grow sustainably. I told him about my thesis on affordable housing, about wanting to create communities where families could thrive. God, we were so young, so certain that wanting something badly enough was the same as deserving it. 6 months later, he proposed. Not with a ring, we couldn't afford one yet, but with a business plan. "Let's do this together," he'd said, spreading papers across my tiny kitchen table. "Your design vision, my business sense, will revolutionize how people think about living spaces." I said yes. Of course I said yes. I was 26 and in love with both him and the dream we were building. The first years were magical in the way that struggle can be when you're young and believe it's temporary. We worked 18-hour days in a shared office space that smelled like old carpet and ambition. I'd design while he pitched, he'd network while I refined. We were partners in every sense of the word. I remember the night we landed our first major client. We'd gone home to our studio apartment, too excited to sleep, too broke to celebrate properly. Michael had opened a bottle of cheap wine, and we'd sat on our secondhand couch, planning our future. "When we make it big," he'd said, his hand in my hair, "I want to buy you a house. Something with huge windows and a studio where you can create whatever you want." "When we make it big," I'd whispered back, "I want to design that house myself." But making it big changes you. Success has a way of rewriting history, of making you forget who you were before the money and recognition arrived. Our first real breakthrough came when I designed a community center that won a National Sustainability Award. The press loved the story: young couple, innovative design, social impact. But somehow, in every interview, in every article, Michael became the visionary and I became his supportive partner. Behind every great man, the headlines read, "The woman who inspires greatness." I told myself it didn't matter. The work was what mattered. The impact was what mattered. But slowly, invisibly, I started to disappear. "Sarah, you're brilliant at this," Michael would say after client meetings where I'd solved complex problems while he took notes. "But you know how they are with women in business. It's easier if I take the lead in presentations. Just until we're more established," I'd think. "Just until people know us better." "You're so much better with the creative side," he'd say when journalists called. "I'll handle the business interviews. You focus on the design work." Division of labor, I'd tell myself. Playing to our strengths. But 5 years in, when the company was thriving, when we had a team of 30 and offices in 3 cities, I realized I'd become invisible. The designs were still mine. The vision was still mine. But the world only saw Michael Cooper, CEO and founder. "We should think about starting a family," he'd said one evening over dinner at the expensive restaurant that had become our regular spot. "You could take some time, focus on that. The business is stable enough now that I can handle the day-to-day." Some time. Like having children was a vacation from real life instead of the beginning of a new one. But I wanted children. I'd always wanted children. And Michael painted such a beautiful picture. Me at home with our babies, designing custom nurseries, maybe writing a book about sustainable family living. Him providing for us all, building an empire that would secure our future. "Could work part-time," I'd suggested. "Keep my hand in the business." "Of course," he'd agreed. "Whatever makes you happy." The first baby came when I was 31. Emma, perfect and demanding and all-consuming. I loved her with a fierceness that surprised me, but I also felt myself fragmenting. The sleepless nights, the constant vigilance, the way my brain felt like cotton wool most days. Michael would come home from work energized, full of stories about new clients and innovative projects. Projects that used to be ours, now just his. He'd hold Emma for 20 minutes, play with her, make her laugh, then hand her back when she got fussy. "You're so natural at this," he'd say. "I don't know how you do it." But I wasn't natural at it. I was drowning in it, losing myself in it, disappearing into the endless cycle of feeding and changing and soothing. The architecture books on my nightstand gathered dust. The sketches I'd started collected coffee stains. When Emma was 2, I got pregnant again. This time, Michael was traveling more, closing bigger deals, making important connections. I managed the pregnancy alone, delivered James alone. Michael was in Tokyo, sealing a contract that would triple our revenue. Our revenue. As if I still had a stake in it. "I'll make it up to you," he'd promised over video call from his hotel room while I held our newborn son. "When this deal closes, we'll take a family vacation. Somewhere beautiful. You can sketch again, get inspired." But by then, I understood something I'd been too naive to see before. The business I'd helped build, the success I'd architected from the ground up, the life I'd designed for us, none of it belonged to me anymore. I'd traded it all for love, for partnership, for a future that had never materialized. The years blurred together after that. PTA meetings and soccer practices and birthday parties. I threw myself into being the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect hostess for his business dinners. I redecorated our house 3 times, each iteration more beautiful than the last, my creative energy channeled into making our life look perfect from the outside. But perfect is just another word for empty when you've lost yourself to create it. The children grew. Emma started school, then James. Michael's business expanded internationally. We bought the cabin, the lake house, the vacation rental portfolio. We had everything we'd ever dreamed of having, everything except the partnership we'd started with. I started to notice the distance first. How Michael would come home and immediately disappear into his study. How he'd check his phone during dinner, during bedtime stories, during the few moments we had alone together. How he'd grown irritable when I'd suggest we work on a project together, like he'd outgrown needing my input. "You've got enough on your plate with the kids," he'd say. "Let me handle the business stuff." But the kids were older now. Emma was 13, James 11. They had their own lives, their own interests, their own friends. I had time again, energy again, ideas again. I just didn't have a place for them anymore. That's when I started paying closer attention. The late nights that became later, the business trips that multiplied, the new wardrobe, the gym membership, the cologne I didn't recognize. The way he'd started talking about our future in vague terms, like it was something that might happen, rather than something we were building together. And then came Jessica. Pretty, ambitious, brilliant Jessica with her fresh ideas and her easy laugh and her complete availability. The woman I'd once been would have confronted him immediately. But that woman had been erased, replaced by someone quieter, more careful, more strategic. This woman, this version of me, decided to wait, to watch, to plan. Because if 15 years of marriage had taught me anything, it was that the person who strikes first rarely wins. The person who strikes last, that was about to change everything. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It never is with intelligent men who've mastered the art of deception. It was a Tuesday morning in March when Michael forgot to delete a text notification from his lock screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight." The usual place? I was making his coffee. French press, 2 sugars, splash of cream, the same way I. Made it for 15 years. When his phone lit up on the counter. My hand didn't even pause as I stirred. I just filed the information away, categorized it, stored it for future reference, Jessica, most likely. Though it could have been James, from accounting, or Jennifer from marketing, or any of the dozen J names that populated his business world. But something about the tone, the intimacy of "can't wait to see you," made my stomach tighten. "Coffee's ready," I said, setting his mug beside his phone. "Thanks, babe," he replied, already reaching for the device. His thumb moved quickly across the screen, deleting, I assumed. When he looked up, his smile was perfectly normal. "You're an angel." An angel. That's what he called me when he needed something. When he'd forgotten our anniversary dinner reservations, when he'd promised to attend Emma's school play but had to work late, when he was lying to my face on a Tuesday morning while I made his coffee. I smiled back. "Just looking out for you." But that night, when he said he had a client dinner that might run late, I started paying closer attention. The thing about being married to someone for 15 years is that you know their patterns better than they know them themselves. Michael was a creature of habit. Client dinners happened on Wednesdays and Thursdays, never Tuesdays. He always told me the restaurant name, complained about the food, asked if I wanted him to bring me dessert home. This time, he was vague. "Some new place downtown," he'd said, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. "Probably won't be worth mentioning." I kissed his cheek, wished him luck, and watched him leave. Then I sat in my car outside the usual place, the Riverside Grill. Intimate. Lighting, private booths, the kind of restaurant where married men take women who aren't their wives. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Seeing his car in the parking lot was confirmation enough. But I did wait. I sat in my car with a thermos of coffee and a book, tracking time like evidence. He walked out at 10:47 p.m. with her. Jessica. Even from a distance, even. In the dim parking lot lighting, I recognized the way she moved, the tilt of her head when she laughed. They stood beside his car for several minutes, talking in that intimate way people do when they're sharing secrets. She kissed him. Not on the cheek. That would have been explainable, professional. She kissed him on the mouth, her hand on his chest, his hand on her lower back. I drove home and was in bed, reading, when he arrived at 11:30. How was dinner? I asked, not looking up from my book. Boring, he said, loosening his tie. Food was terrible. I should have just grabbed something on the way home. The lie came so easily, so naturally, like he'd been practicing. That's when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. My husband was having an affair, and he was good at it. The old me would have confronted him immediately, would have thrown the evidence in his face, demanded explanations, fought for our marriage with everything I had. But the old me had been naive. The old me had believed that love was enough, that honesty mattered, that 15 years of partnership meant something. This me, this evolved me, understood that knowledge was power, and power required patience. So, I started documenting everything. I created a private email account. I bought a small notebook that I kept hidden in my car. I began cataloging the lies, the inconsistencies, the small betrayals that added up to one massive deception. March 15th. Working late, but no lights in his office window when I drove by at 9 p.m. March 18th. New cologne. Expensive. Not his usual brand. March 22nd. Gym membership he never mentioned. Credit card statement shows $200 monthly charge. March 25th. Phone calls outside on the deck. Never did that before. I wasn't stalking him. I was gathering intelligence. There's a difference. Stalking is emotional, desperate, reactive. Intelligence, gathering is methodical, strategic, proactive. I started paying attention to Jessica too. Her social media accounts, carefully curated but revealing. Her work schedule, her lunch habits, her weekend activities. The way she dressed for work, more carefully on the days when Michael was in the office. The way she looked at me during company events, like she knew something I didn't. Oh, sweetheart, I thought during one particularly awkward interaction at a client mixer. You have no idea what I know, but knowledge without action is just pain, and I was tired of being in pain. That's when I called Detective Morrison. Richard Morrison was a recommendation from my divorce attorney friend, Linda, a conversation I'd had under the guise of asking for someone else. He was professional, discreet, and expensive. Worth every penny. I need to know everything, I told him during our first meeting at a coffee shop across town. Where they go, when they meet, how long this has been happening. I need proof. Mrs. Cooper, he said, his voice gentle but direct. Are you sure you want proof? Sometimes knowing changes everything. I thought about that question for a long moment. Did I want proof? Or did I want to keep living in the comfortable lie? The beautiful house? The perfect marriage that existed only on the surface? I already know, I said finally. I just need everyone else to know too. The surveillance began immediately. Within a week, I had photographs, timestamps, a pattern of deception that was both methodical and sloppy. They thought they were being careful, but careful is relative when you're blinded by lust and the thrill of secrecy. The cabin was their regular meeting place. Our cabin, the one we'd bought for family vacations where we'd taught the kids to, fish, where Michael had promised to retire with me someday. They'd been using it for 3 months. 3 months of weekend business trips and client emergencies. 3 months of them playing house in the space I'd decorated, sleeping in the bed I'd chosen, cooking breakfast in the kitchen where I'd made pancakes for my children. But it wasn't the infidelity that broke something inside me. I'd already grieved the death of our marriage months ago. It was the calculated nature of it, the way he'd planned every detail while looking me in the eye and calling me his rock. It was the realization that while I'd been disappearing myself to support his dreams, he'd been planning his escape. The final straw came on a Thursday evening in April. I was upstairs folding laundry when I heard him on the phone in his study, door closed but voice carrying. "She doesn't suspect anything," he was saying. "She's too trusting, too focused on the kids. We just need to be patient a little longer." Patient. Like I was an obstacle to be managed rather than a person to be respected. Once Emma graduates high school, it'll be easier to make the transition. Sarah will be fine. She'll get the house, enough alimony to maintain her lifestyle. She's not the type to make a scene. Not the type to make a scene. 15 years of marriage, and he thought he knew me. But he was right about one thing. I wasn't going to make a scene. Scenes are messy, emotional, unpredictable. What I was planning was none of those things. That night, after he'd gone to sleep, I sat in my home office, the same office where I'd once designed sustainable communities and dreamed of changing the world, and I began designing something new, a different kind of blueprint, a different kind of structure. I opened my laptop and started researching property records, business licenses, financial documents. I called in favors from old classmates who worked in real estate, urban planning, legal services, people who remembered the woman I'd been before I became Mrs. Michael Cooper. By sunrise, I had a plan. Not just for revenge. Revenge was too simple, too temporary. I had a plan for reconstruction, for taking back everything I'd built and lost, everything I'd sacrificed and forgotten. Jessica's childhood home was just the beginning. The purchase of 1247 Elm Street happened on a Wednesday morning at exactly 10:15 a.m. I remember the time because I was watching the clock, counting down the moments until Jessica's entire world shifted beneath her feet. My lawyer, Patricia Chen, had outdone herself. The cash offer was aggressive, $30,000 over asking price, no inspection, no contingencies, closing in 7 days. The kind of offer that sellers dream about and other buyers can't compete with. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" Patricia had asked during our final review of the paperwork. "It's a significant investment for what appears to be an emotional purchase." Emotional. If only she knew how far beyond emotion I'd traveled. "I'm sure," I said, signing my name with the same steady hand that had once drafted blueprints for community centers and sustainable housing. Consider it a long-term investment. The house itself was unremarkable, a modest 2-story colonial. In Jessica's old neighborhood, the kind of place where middle-class families raise their children and believe in the American dream. It needed work, which was perfect. I had plans for 1247 Elm Street. Big plans. But first, I had to spring the trap that would make those plans possible. The beauty of being invisible for 15 years is that people forget you have eyes and ears. They forget you've been in every business meeting, every strategy session, every conversation about contracts and partnerships and liability. They especially forget that you've been reviewing legal documents for a decade and a half. Michael's company, Cooper Consulting, our company, though the world had long forgotten my contribution, had grown large enough to require serious oversight. Board meetings, shareholder agreements, partnership contracts with clauses designed to protect the company's reputation and integrity. Clauses like Section 12.3 of the Executive Code of Conduct, which I'd helped draft 5 years ago during a scandal, involving a competitor. The section that specifically addressed conduct detrimental to company interests, including but not limited to personal relationships that create conflicts of interest, compromise professional judgment, or damage the company's reputation. The section that carried automatic penalties including termination, forfeiture of profit sharing, and potential legal action for breach of fiduciary duty. The section that Jessica had signed when she became a senior marketing consultant 6 months ago. I'd spent weeks building my case, collecting evidence not just of the affair, but of how it had compromised their professional judgment. The client contracts Jessica had influenced, the business trips they'd taken together on company money, the way Michael had promoted her ahead of more qualified candidates, the way they'd used company resources, including the corporate cabin lease, for personal activities. Detective Morrison had been thorough. His report read like a legal brief, complete with timestamps, financial records, and enough photographic evidence to sink a battleship. But I wasn't ready to torpedo the ship yet. First, I wanted Michael to feel what it was like when the ground shifted beneath his feet. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my car outside Jessica's apartment building, not stalking, just observing, when my phone rang. "Mrs. Cooper, this is Janet from Dr. Phillips's office. We have your test results back, and the doctor would like to schedule an appointment to discuss them with you." For a moment, my carefully constructed composure cracked. I'd had routine blood work done the week before, nothing unusual, just my annual physical. But the tone in Janet's voice, the request for an immediate appointment. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "The doctor prefers to discuss results in person. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" I scheduled the appointment and sat in my car, hands shaking slightly. This wasn't part of the plan. Health scares, medical emergencies, the possibility of my own mortality. These were variables I hadn't accounted for. What if I'm sick? What if I don't have time to see this through? But then I looked up at Jessica's apartment window, saw her silhouette moving across the living room, probably getting ready for another evening with my husband, and something crystallized inside me. Whatever happens, happens. But not before I finish what I started. The next morning, Dr. Phillips delivered news that was both devastating and liberating at the same time. "The tests show some irregularities that we need to monitor closely," she said, her voice gentle but serious. "It's not immediately life-threatening, but it's something we'll need to address with treatment, possibly surgery." I listened to her explanation of procedures and timelines and survival rates, nodding at the appropriate moments, asking the right questions. But inside, I was recalculating everything. Time. The one resource I'd always assumed I had in abundance was suddenly finite, potentially limited. That afternoon, I called Patricia. "I want to accelerate the timeline," I said. "Everything we've discussed, everything we've planned, I want it implemented immediately." Sarah, rushing, could compromise. "I don't have time to be patient anymore." On Monday morning, Michael received a registered letter at his office. I know because I was sitting in the coffee shop across the street, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as his assistant delivered it to his desk. I saw him open it. Saw his face change as he read the contents. Saw him pick up his phone, probably calling the company's legal department. The letter was beautiful in its simplicity. A formal notice from the board of directors regarding allegations of conduct violations, effective immediately suspending his authority to make executive decisions pending a full investigation. The same letter was delivered to Jessica 5 minutes later. I finished my latte and walked across the street, riding the elevator to the 20th floor with the calm satisfaction of someone who'd just played the opening move in a much larger game. "Sarah?" Michael's voice was tight with confusion when I entered his office. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see if you needed anything," I said, my voice warm with concern. "You looked upset when you opened that letter." He stared at me, searching my face for some sign that I knew what was happening. But I'd perfected the art of looking innocent over 15 years of marriage. "It's nothing," he said finally. "Just some corporate nonsense. Probably a disgruntled employee making false accusations." False accusations. The phrase hung in the air between us like a challenge. Well, I'm sure the board will sort everything out, I said. They're very thorough when it comes to protecting the company's interests. Something flickered in his eyes then. Recognition, maybe, or the first stirring of real fear. How do you know what the board is like? He asked. I smiled, the same innocent smile I'd worn for 15 years while he erased me from our shared success. Darling, I helped write their procedures. Remember? 5 years ago, after the Henderson scandal? You said my legal background would be useful for drafting conduct policies. The color drained from his face as the implications hit him. You've been very thorough over the years, I continued conversationally. Teaching me about the business, involving me in strategic planning, having me review all those important documents. I learned so much. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. I should let you get back to work, I said, turning toward the door. I'm sure you have a lot of calls to make. As I reached the door, I paused and looked back. Oh, and Michael? Jessica might want to start looking for a new apartment. I heard through the real estate gossip that her old neighborhood is about to undergo some significant changes. The elevator doors closed on his shocked expression, and I allowed myself a small smile. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning, exactly 72 hours after Michael received that letter. I was in my new office, a small space I'd rented downtown under my maiden name, when Patricia called with an update. The board voted, she said, her voice carrying a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal amazement. Unanimous decision to terminate both Michael and Jessica, effective immediately. The evidence you provided was comprehensive. Comprehensive. That was one word for it. Devastating was another. But I wasn't finished, not even close. What about the non-compete clauses? I asked. Enforceable for 18 months. Neither of them can work in consulting within a 3-state radius. And Sarah... Patricia paused, and I could hear her shuffling papers. The profit-sharing forfeiture alone amounts to over $2 million. Michael's pension contributions, stock options, everything tied to company performance. It's all gone. $2 million. The money that was supposed to secure our retirement, fund Emma's college education, pay for the lake house we'd planned to grow old in. The money he'd gambled away for a 28-year-old blonde who thought she was playing chess when she was actually just a pawn. And the other matter? I asked. The property transfers are complete. Everything's in your name now. The cabin, the lake house, the rental properties. As agreed in your original partnership documents, which predated your marriage. The partnership documents. The papers we'd signed when we were young and in love and believed we were building something together. The documents that legally established my stake in everything we'd created, before Michael had convinced me to step back, to be supportive, to let him take the lead. The documents he'd forgotten existed. My phone buzzed with a text message. Michael, we need to talk. Come home. Home. As if he still had the right to call it that. I drove to the house, my house according to the property records, slowly, savoring the moment. The tree-lined street looked the same as always, peaceful and suburban, hiding the drama unfolding. Behind manicured lawns and perfect facades. Michael's car was in the driveway, but something was wrong. He was sitting behind the wheel, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. Even from a distance, I could see the frustration in his body language. Making calls, I thought. Trying to salvage something. Anything. I parked and walked calmly to the front door, keys ready. But before I could unlock it, the door swung open. Michael stood there, disheveled in a way I'd never seen him. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice barely controlled. "Hello. To you too," I said, stepping past him into the foyer. "You look tired. Rough day at the office?" "Don't." His voice cracked. "Don't play innocent. I know it was you." I set my purse on the entry table and turned to face him. For 15 years, this man had towered over me, literally and figuratively. His presence had filled every room. His voice had carried more weight. His decisions had shaped our life. Now he looked small, diminished, powerless. "I don't know what you mean," I said calmly. "The board meeting. The evidence. The fucking photographs, Sarah." "Where did you get the photographs?" "Fucking photographs." He'd never used that tone with me before. Desperate, angry, defeated. "What photographs?" I asked. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then shoved the screen toward me. Detective Morrison's work was even better than I'd remembered. High-resolution images of Michael and Jessica at the cabin. Timestamps clearly visible. The intimacy undeniable. "These," he said. "Someone sent these to every board member, along with financial records showing misuse of company resources, conflicts of interest, breach of fiduciary duty. My entire career is destroyed, Sarah. 15 years of building this company and it's gone. 15 years. The same amount of time I'd spent building it with him, then watching him erase my contributions. "I'm sorry," I said. "That sounds devastating." "Sorry?" His voice pitched higher. "You're sorry? This was you. I know it was you." "Michael," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You're not thinking clearly. Why would I want to hurt your career? If your career is destroyed, how does that benefit me?" He stared at me, and I could see him trying to work through the logic, trying to find the flaw in my reasoning. "Besides," I continued, "I wouldn't even know how to do something like that. I'm just a housewife, remember? Too trusting, too focused on the kids to pay attention to business matters." The words hit him like physical blows. His own words, thrown back at him from that overheard phone conversation. "You heard," he whispered. "Heard what?" "That night I was talking to—" He stopped himself, but it was too late. "Talking to Jessica?" I supplied helpfully. "About how I don't suspect anything? About how I'm too trusting to be a problem?" His face went white. "The thing is, Michael, you were right about some things. I am trusting. I trusted you with my career, my dreams, my identity. I trusted you with 15 years of my life." I paused, let the words settle. "But you were wrong about one thing. I'm not too trusting to pay attention." My phone rang. Patricia's name appeared on the screen. "Excuse me," I said, stepping away to answer. "Patricia?" "Yes, I can talk." Michael watched as I took the call, his desperation growing with each passing second. "The Jessica matter?" I said into the phone, making sure my voice was loud enough for him to hear. "Oh, good. The eviction notice was served. Excellent timing." I could see Michael's confusion deepening. "Eviction notice? And the new tenants are ready to move in this weekend? Perfect. Yes, I think the renovation plans will really transform the neighborhood." I hung up and turned back to Michael, who was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Sarah," he said slowly. "What eviction notice?" "Oh, that," I said casually. "I bought Jessica's childhood home. You know, the one on Elm Street that she lost to foreclosure when she was 16? The one she always talked about wanting to buy back someday?" His mouth opened, then closed, no sound emerging. "I'm planning to renovate it completely. Turn it into affordable housing for single mothers. Very fitting, don't you think? Helping women who've been left with nothing, giving them a fresh start." "You can't," he whispered. "You can't afford—" "Actually, I can. Turns out those old partnership documents we signed 20 years ago are still legally binding. Amazing. What you can accomplish when you have proper legal documentation of your business contributions." The realization hit him like a freight train. The business, the properties, the investments, half of everything had always been mine on paper. He'd just forgotten, lost in his own narrative of being the sole architect of our success, the lawyer. "Also mentioned something interesting about adultery laws in this state," I continued conversationally. "Apparently, infidelity affects asset division in divorce proceedings." Who knew? Michael sank into the nearest chair, his face in his hands. Why? He asked, his voice muffled. Why are you doing this? I looked at him, really looked at him. This man I'd loved for 15 years, this stranger who'd planned to discard me like outdated furniture. I'm not doing anything to you, Michael. I'm finally doing something for me. My phone buzzed again. A text from Detective Morrison. Jay's apartment cleared out. Forwarding address. Her mother's house in Phoenix. Looks like she's done with this. Situation. I showed Michael the message. Looks like Jessica decided to go home to her mother, I said. Smart girl. She figured out which way the wind was blowing. He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw him really see me. Not the convenient wife, not the supportive background player, but me. The architect who'd built his empire and was now systematically dismantling it. I never meant for this to happen, he said. Yes, you did, I replied. You meant for all of it to happen. You just thought I'd never find out? I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? He called after me. To my new office, I said. I'm starting a consulting firm, specializing in organizational restructuring and crisis management. I have quite a bit of experience in both areas. 6 months later, I was standing in the conference room of Morrison Strategic Consulting. Yes, I'd named it after the detective who'd helped me see the truth, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that I'd designed. Myself, my windows, my conference room, my company. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 15 years, I'd been the invisible partner in Cooper Consulting. Now, former Cooper Consulting clients were lining up to work with me. Sarah, my assistant. Marcus called from the doorway. Your 3 o'clock is here. The Henderson Group? I smiled. Robert Henderson, the same man whose scandal had led to those conduct policies I'd drafted, the policies that had ultimately destroyed Michael's career. Life has a peculiar sense of humor sometimes. Send him in, I said. The past 6 months had been a blur of reconstruction, not just of my career, but of myself. The woman who walked into that conference room bore little resemblance to the quiet wife who'd made coffee and smiled on command. This woman wore power suits, tailored to fit her perfectly. This woman spoke in board meetings without asking permission. This woman had business cards with her name in bold letters and no qualifier underneath. Not wife of, or mother of, or assistant to. Just Sarah Morrison, CEO. Mrs. Morrison, Robert Henderson said, extending his hand. Thank you for seeing me. Mrs. Morrison. I'd taken back my maiden name as part of the divorce proceedings. Another small reclamation of the person I'd been before. I'd disappeared into someone else's story. Please call me Sarah, I said, gesturing to the chairs around the conference table. I understand you're looking for crisis management consulting? For the next hour, we discussed his company's challenges, a data breach, employee misconduct, regulatory issues, the kinds of problems I'd been solving behind the scenes for years, the kinds of strategic thinking that had built Cooper Consulting's reputation. Your approach is refreshing, he said as our meeting concluded. Most consultants come in with predetermined solutions. You actually listen. Most consultants. I wondered if he was thinking of Michael, who'd probably pitched him with flashy presentations and generic strategies. Every crisis is unique, I said. Cookie-cutter solutions create more problems than they solve. After he left, I sat alone in the conference room, reviewing the contract he'd signed. 6 figures for a 6-month engagement. The third major client. I'd landed this month. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mom, got into Columbia early admission. Can't wait to tell you everything. Love you. Columbia. My 18-year-old daughter had gotten into her dream school, the same school where I'd planned to pursue my master's degree before I'd gotten pregnant and put my dreams on hold. I called her immediately. Mom? Emma's voice was bright with excitement. Did you see my text? I did, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without your help with the application essays. And Mom, I know things have been hard this year, with the divorce and everything, but seeing you build your business from scratch, it's inspired me. I want to study architecture too. Architecture. The dreams I'd set aside were living on in my daughter. Emma, I said, my voice thick with emotion, that makes me happier than you could possibly know. After we hung up, I walked to my office and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a framed photo from 20 years ago, Michael and me, on the day we'd signed our first big contract, young and hopeful and believing we could change the world together. I'd kept it, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. A reminder of who I'd been before I'd learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less threatening to his ego. My intercom buzzed. Sarah? There's someone here to see you. Says he doesn't have an appointment, but it's important. Who is it, Marcus? Michael. Cooper? I sat back in my chair, considering. I hadn't seen him since the day I'd left him sitting in our former living room 6 months ago. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to a small apartment across town, that he was working as a freelance consultant for smaller clients, that Jessica had never returned from Phoenix. Send him in, I said. He looked different. Older, somehow. The confidence that had once filled every room had been replaced by something quieter, more uncertain. He was wearing a suit I didn't recognize, cheaper than his usual wardrobe. Sarah, he said, standing awkwardly in my doorway. Thank you for seeing me. Michael. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Please, sit. He sat down, looking around my office with something that might have been admiration or might have been regret. Nice place, he said. I heard you were doing well. I am, I said simply. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. I came to apologize, he said finally, for everything, for the affair, for taking you for granted, for not seeing you. Really seeing. You! I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, for the calculated charm that had once swept me off my feet. But this felt different. Raw. Honest. Thank you, I said. That means something. I also came to ask. He paused, struggling, with the words. I'm trying to rebuild, start over, and I wondered if you might consider. I know I have no right to ask, but if you ever need a partner, or a consultant, or even just an employee. The request hung in the air between us. Michael Cooper, asking me for a job. 6 months ago, the irony would have felt like victory. Now, it just felt sad. Michael, I said gently, you need to build your own life, not try to attach yourself to mine again. He nodded, looking down at his hands. I know. You're right. I miss working with you. I miss the partnership we had in the beginning. The partnership. Before the success, before the ego, before he'd convinced himself that he was the genius and I was just the support system. We were good together, I admitted. But that was a long time ago. We're different people now. You're stronger, he said, looking up at me. More yourself, if that makes sense. It did make sense. For the first time in 15 years, I was entirely myself. Not someone's wife, not someone's mother, not someone's shadow. Just me. The medical situation, he said suddenly. How are you doing with that? I was surprised he knew about it then. Remembered that small towns have big ears, especially when marriages dissolve publicly. I'm fine, I said. The treatment worked. Clean bill of health. Clean bill of health. The words had a double meaning I wasn't sure he'd catch. I'm glad, he said, and I could hear the genuine relief in his voice. I know things ended badly between us, but I never wanted. I still care about you, Sarah. I always will. The man sitting across from my desk wasn't the arrogant executive who'd erased my contributions or the cheating husband who'd planned my disposal. This was someone who'd lost everything and was trying to figure out how to be human again. "I care about you too," I said. "But caring about someone and trusting them are different things." He nodded. "I understand." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth," he said, "watching you build this company, seeing you become who you were meant to be, I'm proud of you. I know I don't have the right to be proud of you anymore, but I am." After he left, I sat in my office as the sun set over the city, thinking about second chances and new beginnings, and the difference between justice and revenge. Revenge would have been destroying him completely, grinding him into nothing, taking satisfaction in his pain. Justice was building something better from the ashes of what we'd lost. My phone rang. Another potential client, another opportunity to solve problems and create solutions and use the strategic mind I'd hidden for so many years. Because the thing about rising from betrayal isn't that you become someone new. It's that you finally become who you were always meant to be. 3 years later, I stood beneath the arching trees of Columbia University, watching Emma present her final thesis. Her voice was steady, her words bold, her presence magnetic. She wasn't just giving a presentation, she was commanding a room. Her design, a public space for women rebuilding after crisis, stood like a love letter to strength, healing, and rebirth. Legacy. That word echoed in my chest. I once stood on this campus too, years ago, full of promise I would shelve for marriage, motherhood, and the slow erosion of my voice. But today, that lost girl was no longer grieving. She was witnessing something bigger than recovery. She was watching her legacy come alive in the eyes of her daughter. Afterward, Emma found me outside and hugged me like she used to when she was little. "You saw it," she whispered. "I did," I said, my voice catching. "And you were extraordinary. You made me brave, Mom." "No," I smiled. "You made yourself brave. I just showed you it was possible." That night, I returned to my apartment overlooking the river, the kind of place I used to only imagine living in. No reminders of the past, just glass, space, light, and peace. On my wall hung Emma's first sketch, framed carefully, a shattered circle rebuilt with gold leaf lines, imperfect, strong, whole again. Beneath it, her chosen words, "We are not what breaks us. We are what we rebuild." My phone buzzed. A handwritten letter had arrived by mail, rare these days. The sender? Michael. Inside, a brochure for a nonprofit he'd founded, consulting. Services for women starting over. Small, quiet work. The kind that heals, not headlines. His note read, "It's not redemption, but it's a beginning. I thought you should know." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not out of bitterness, but closure. Not every wound needs reopening. Some just need to be left clean. That weekend, Emma and I drove out to the house I grew up in. The walls were cracked. The garden, overrun. But the foundation was still solid, like me, once buried under years of silence and sacrifice. "You're thinking of restoring it?" Emma asked. "I'm thinking of transforming it," I replied. "A retreat, a safe space for women, starting again. Maybe call it the Morrison House." Emma smiled. "Your legacy." I looked out over the porch where I once sat dreaming of a life bigger than my own reflection. And now, here it was. Not a dream, a reality. A choice I made, over and over, again. To rise, to rebuild, to become. Because the truth is, we don't just survive betrayal. We use it to carve out the lives we were always meant to lead. And sometimes, just sometimes, our stories become the roadmap for someone else's escape. So if you've ever been broken, silenced, or underestimated, come back. Because next, time, we tell the story of another woman who didn't just survive, she rewrote the ending.